Every teacher, pretty much every day, is kind of like a walking data collection unit. You're constantly assessing who needs attention, what's working, what's maybe not working so well.
That's right. That daily gut feeling, that knowledge is absolutely vital. But often, well, it's a bit all over the place, isn't it? Today, we're really deep diving into how you can take those necessary reactive observations and actually make them systematic, make them powerful research.
Yeah, and our mission here is to give you the shortcut, really, to getting informed about this really practical, powerful field, action research. Specifically, practitioner research, right? In early childhood education. This is about gaining some professional power, moving beyond just, dealing with problems day to day to actively solving them, and even building theory based on your classroom.
Exactly. Action research, or AR as it's often called, it's a specific kind of qualitative inquiry. And the key thing is, the teacher isn't bringing in some outside expert. No, they become the extra insider. They run the study themselves for themselves.
I really like that the insider idea, and I know the process itself, it's been mapped out. Shen called it reflective practice, didn't he? Could you maybe help us visualize that cycle? What are the key steps someone actually needs to take for this to be, well, research and not just, good, thoughtful teaching?
Right. It's a deliberate cycle, really intentional. It kicks off with stepping back, looking at your observations, weighing the possibilities.
Hmm?
Then you take purposeful action based on that thinking. And then, this is crucial, you assess the outcome. You look at what happened. The whole thing, all of it, has to be aimed at improving your specific practice and your own professional growth. It makes sure your actions aren't just like random trial and error, but measured, data-informed steps.
Okay, let's address the elephant in the room here. Why is this specific kind of research, action research, so important in an ECE context? I mean, why not just aim for those big traditional experimental studies? Aren't they supposed to be the gold standard?
Well, they are the gold standard. If you want findings, you can generalize everywhere.
Yeah.
But the reality of an early childhood classroom, it's just so complex, so
Mm.
dynamic. Teachers often just don't have the time, or maybe the stability, definitely not the resources, for those massive standardized studies. AR is more like a practical toolkit. It's built for these busy, changing environments where you simply can't control every single variable.
And the big difference seems to be who's doing the research, right? AR comes from that qualitative tradition, borrows techniques from sociology maybe, but the researcher is the person living it day in, day out. They're embedded, the insider.
That's the core of it.
Okay, but wait a sec. If the teacher is the insider, how do you deal with potential bias? Doesn't being so close sometimes, well, blind you to things?
That's a really important point, a
Mhm.
crucial methodological challenge. And it's exactly why the systematic data collection, the tools we'll get into later, is so vital. It's incredibly easy to just assume we know what's going on in our own room because we're there all the time.
Yeah.
AR forces you, really, to look at objective data. Look at the classroom map, look at the journal entry, and challenge those assumptions. Like Alice pointed out back in 2002, the goal isn't necessarily generating findings that fit every single classroom everywhere.
Right. So we're not trying to create some grand theory of American education from one classroom study. It's more about, say, figuring out how to get a fair distribution of teacher attention during story time, right here in my classroom.
Precisely. Spot on. Its main purpose is practical. It's a tool for solving the actual problem being felt by the person right there in that context. And the payoff. It's significant. Getting involved in AR genuinely helps teachers become, as the research says, more reflective and ultimately stronger teachers. This whole systematic process lets them develop a really strong voice, even in policy discussions, because their insights aren't just opinions. They're backed by lived experience and hard data. Okay, so you mentioned AR makes teachers stronger, helps them shift from feeling maybe overwhelmed to being real decision makers. Theory's great, but execution is key. So where does a teacher actually start this whole process? It's not like they begin with some complicated academic hypothesis, is it? No, not at all. It starts much simpler, with personal wonderings, just those little questions that pop into your head naturally. The things that maybe niggle at you during prep time or the thoughts you jot down quickly after the kids leave.
Okay, so we're taking those moments of like professional curiosity and turning them into actual research questions. I like that. Can you give us an example? What's a good starting wondering?
Oh, a classic one is something like, I wonder if I actually spend more time interacting with the boys than the girls in my class.
Mm.
Or maybe, I wonder if the type of activity we do first thing in the morning affects how kids group themselves at lunchtime.
That's totally relatable. But the trick, I guess, is taking that simple observation and turning it into a deeper question, one that can actually build some theory. Like, if you ask, do I spend more time with boys? And your data says, yep, you do. You could just stop there, couldn't you? Unless you pivot.
Right. And that pivot is where it really becomes research. Action research pushes you to go deeper, to connect the dots between different things. So you don't just ask if you spend more time with boys, you ask why. You ask, does the specific activity I choose, like, say, working with kids in the block corner versus doing a read aloud, does that determine who I spend my time with and maybe why?
Ah, okay. So now you're actually building a theory about how your curriculum choices might be systematically affecting teacher-child interactions. You're digging into the why behind the pattern.
Exactly. And the context is absolutely crucial. These research questions, they always emerge from a specific context. There's a great example of this with Paula Higuera. She was a student teacher, and she was really concerned about children learning English as a second language in her classroom. Her specific situation, how these kids were tackling learning both English and Spanish at the same time in her first grade class, that's what drove her whole inquiry. She decided to really focus in on one child, track their progress closely to understand the dynamics of juggling those two languages. Okay, so once you've got your research question framed, you need data, you need objective information. Action researchers had this really diverse toolkit, basically. Tools designed to give you different lenses, if you will, to help see the patterns that might be hidden just beneath the surface of everyday classroom life.
Right, lenses to get past our assumptions. Let's start with maybe one of the most basic but powerful tools, classroom maps. What's so revolutionary about just drawing the room?
Well, they're often cited as like the easiest and the most informative tools
Yeah.
because they instantly ground your data in the physical space. There's a key technique Atchison and Gall talked about called tracking movement flow. You literally just plot on the map where a specific child or maybe a small group moves over a set period of time, like say during free choice time.
That's fantastic. It's like a visual heat map of engagement or maybe avoidance. You could see right away if the reading corner is totally ignored or if, I don't know, everyone's suddenly flocking to the sensory table for some reason.
Absolutely. You see the space usage immediately.
Yeah.
Next up, we have something most teachers are familiar with, anecdotal records. These are those classic time-sampled observations. Maybe you decide to observe every 5 minutes, or 10 or 15, and you focus on a specific child or maybe a specific activity center. The key is you're just documenting exactly what you see and hear, not interpreting it right away.
Ah, yes. And there was that really great personal story in the source material about how powerful these records can be. A teacher realized that keeping these systematic notes actually helped her stop focusing on why she was having trouble managing the class.
That's the one. The act of documentation itself shifted her focus. Instead of constantly looking for problems or deficit behavior, she started training herself, quite consciously, to catch children being good.
Hmm.
And that subtle shift in perspective, which came directly from doing systematic observation, helps reinforce the positive behaviors you want to see.
That's brilliant. The tool itself changes the teacher's focus. Okay, so what about teachers' journals? What makes them a research tool and not just, a personal diary?
They're super important for building that internal theory we talked about because they capture your immediate thoughts, your reflections, your interpretations right after something happens. The recommendation is often to try and write daily, maybe for just 10 minutes or so. And there's a neat technique. Divide your notebook page in two. Use the left side for the raw journal entry, just describe what happened. Then use the right side for your immediate comments, analysis, maybe connections to other observations, or notes about patterns you think you're seeing. It forces that analytical step.
Right, makes you process it. And then we get to the sort of wide lens tools, video and audio recordings.
Yeah, Atchison and Gall called these powerful wide lens tools. Video is amazing because it captures everything, the verbal back and forth, sure, but also all the nonverbal stuff, body language, subtle shifts in how the room is managed, and audio recordings. Fantastic for tracking language development over time. There's an example of a colleague who recorded one child telling the story of a gingerbread man 3 times across the school year.
Wow, imagine having that. Undeniable proof of linguistic growth that you might totally miss with just a checklist. Okay, and finally, the really tangible stuff. Samples of children's work and photographs.
Yes, these are vital. They document progress in a very concrete way. You can see changes in block constructions, in writing development, in drawing complexity. And these artifacts often reveal children's thinking, their strength, their conceptual understanding in ways observation alone might not catch. This whole idea is really strongly influenced by the kind of documentation you see coming out of Reggio Emilia, where artifacts are central to making learning visible.
Okay, the tools sound great. Very practical. But, the proof is in the pudding, right? Let's look at some real-world examples. These case studies really show how using this systematic approach can lead to genuine, sometimes really surprising aha moments for teachers.
Definitely. First up, let's talk about Rust's study on children's activity choices. It sounds pretty simple on the surface. It was a 2-week study, used a basic classroom map, and just tracked where kids chose to work at 2 specific times, 9:30 in the morning, and then again at 10:15 a.m.
Okay, seems straightforward. So what was the unexpected finding? What was the aha?
They stumbled upon this really interesting phenomenon, something Montessori had actually described way back, calling it a false fatigue shift. It happened around 9:45 a.m. Suddenly, the noise level in the classroom would spike. Kids seemed restless, maybe a bit scattered, flitting between activities.
Right, and that's exactly the moment when, as a teacher, your instinct is probably to jump in, right? Manage the chaos, maybe transition everyone to something quieter.
Exactly the instinct. But the data, the map tracking, showed something else. It showed that after this brief period, what Montessori called a real breath, the kids would naturally, on their own, settle into activities that actually required higher levels of concentration. Things like reading, detailed manipulative games, math activities.
Wow. Okay, that's huge. So sometimes the best action is no action. The research protected that crucial learning time. It showed the teacher the restlessness wasn't necessarily a behavior problem to be managed, but maybe a natural cognitive gear shift.
Precisely, a powerful insight. Okay, second case study. This one involves Rachel Zindler, who was looking closely at inclusion. She focused on 7 specific students with special education needs within a mainstream second-grade classroom.
And she used sociograms, right, those diagrams that map out social connections and maybe who's being left out. So did her work show that they managed to create a truly inclusive space for these kids?
Well, they did implement interventions, things like class meetings to build community. And these strategies were successful in making the overall classroom climate feel, in her words, more inclusive and generally supportive. People felt better. But the research uncovered something deeper, something hiding beneath that positive surface feeling.
Okay, what did the objective mapping reveal that just observing the general vibe might have missed?
Zindler's sociogram data showed that even though the whole class felt more inclusive, the actual social status of those 7 specific students with special needs consistently remained lower than that of all the other children in the class.
Oof. Wow. So the surface success, the feeling of inclusivity, it actually masked a more persistent, subtle kind of social alienation for those particular kids. That really underscores how complex true inclusion is and how action research can bring these difficult, maybe uncomfortable truths to light that we might otherwise miss.
It really does. It gets beneath the surface assumptions.
Yeah.
Okay, finally, let's quickly circle back to Paulo Higuera, the student teacher we mentioned earlier, who was focused on second language learning.
Right, she was looking at how her first graders were navigating both English and Spanish. What did her data collection show about that process?
She systematically collected writing samples from one specific child over a 3-month period, just kept everything. And looking at that collection over time, she could clearly document a shift. The child's writing started showing more blending of Spanish and English sentence structures, even idioms. It provided this tangible, measurable evidence of linguistic development in action. It helped her build a theory about how this child was actively making sense of 2 languages at once, which is way beyond just observing, oh, this child speaks 2 languages. Hashtag tag outro.
Okay, so listening to all this deep dive really makes it clear that action research is, well, it's more than just collecting data systematically. It seems like it's a real catalyst for deep self-reflection, the kind that actually changes outcomes for children.
It absolutely refines professional practice. Clark and Florio Ruine, they described it perfectly as thoughtful teaching. It genuinely helps transform teachers into really effective decision makers, people who understand not just what seems to work in their room, but why it works. And crucially, especially in early childhood, where kids might not always have the words to tell us what they need, AR gives us objective tools. Tools to figure out how we can make every interaction, every moment, really count for them.
Yeah, it sounds like it's about empowering teachers, giving them a professional voice that's actually grounded in solid evidence they gather themselves, and shaping them into genuinely reflective professionals.
Spot on. So here's the final thought, the provocative question maybe, for you, the listener. If a kindergarten teacher Just by dedicating maybe 10 minutes a day to systematic data collection, can uncover these counterintuitive patterns like false fatigue or spot subtle social dynamics that were previously invisible. What assumptions might you be operating under in your own professional world, whether you're a manager, an administrator, a specialist, a technician, whatever your field? What deeply held beliefs about how things work could potentially be challenged or refined just by committing to 10 minutes a day of systematic reflection and objective observation? Maybe just start with a simple wondering, collect a little data, and just see where it takes your practice.